Hey, what's going on? It's Jimmy Friday, and I ain't gonna hold you too long. This week's topic is a lifetime of goodness and unfailing love, and this is inspired by Psalms 23, verse 6. I'll go to the scripture. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in your house forever. You know, from a creation point of view, can you picture or imagine what your Creator's goodness and unfailing love look like? Can you imagine how far, how wide it stretches in your life? You know, reflecting back to my youth, when I first encountered doing, a lot of evil acts, it was around the time I was getting initiated on, the Hoover Crip. It's a lot different nowadays, as far as with that part of life, but I spent decades of doing a lot of wrong, and I spent decades of doing good in my eyes that I thought was good, but the motives behind it wasn't good because the actions were evil, and so now, I have a scripture that I can weigh my motives up against, and I'll share it with you. It's in Matthew chapter 6, verses 22 through 23. Your eye is a lamp that provides light for your body. When your eye is healthy, your whole body is filled with light. But when your eye is unhealthy, your whole body is filled with darkness. And if the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep that darkness is. And so, like I said, now when I do things, I can weigh my motives against that scripture on the scale to see if my motives are good intentions or it's something that's not right with my heart at the time. With the change in my heart posture, it has led me to see how much goodness and unfailing love that my Creator has for me. I am grateful to be alive today to help, and help building up the world and not destroying it. The Great Spirit has nudged me over my course of life, throughout my life to make changes, to bring me into my purpose, to encourage and motivate. The Spirit has taught me about grace and mercy, in tremendous ways. Sometimes, when scenes from my past flash before my eyes, how off track I used to be to being alive today, to be able to watch my son grow into a young man, it amazes me. Surely my Creator's goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life. And so just that word pursue is to follow someone, to catch or attack them. So just imagine that someone has that much goodness and unfailing love that they want to attack you with it. They want to pursue you. So no matter how far you run, you will never be able to outrun the pursuit of your Creator. And that's just being honest. You can't outrun that. The love is so much, you can't outrun it. So I think about this time, I used to, around New Year's, I would always go party, and hang out, with some family or friends or whatever. And so one year, when I started wanting, to make a change in my life, I was like, man, okay, this New Year's, I'm going to try something different. So I went to, I think it could have been Transformation Church back in the day or something, I think they was having like a New Year's Eve party or something. So, I go up there, I don't know nobody in the building, so I'm just kind of roaming through the lobby, walking around, checking out the scene. And I run into my a close friend, my brother, Lamont George, and so we see each other, and we talking, and the stories still make me laugh, because when he saw me and we was talking, he said, "You're the last person I thought I would see up in here." And every time I think about it, it make me giggle. It really make me laugh on the inside, but it also brings joy, You know, just knowing, it reminds me that how much goodness and mercy that has been shown to me, you know, even when I thought I was too far gone, you know. So, you know, I'm a firm believer in, you know, as long as there's breath in a person's lungs, there's hope for change, you know, and just thinking like, you know, the memories of my gang life, you know, are some of my darkest moments. You know, I've done a lot of wrong, you know, so looking back at, you know, from both sides of the gun, being a hunter and a prey, you know, that's proof, that's my proof of goodness and mercy, you know, goodness and unfailing love in my life. For me to be standing here today, you know, recording, you know, and trying to bring some light into the world, you know, so goodness is wanting to help someone with no strings attached. And unfailing love is accepting someone, flaws and all, and being patient with them as they transform like the caterpillar into the butterfly. You know, so surely your Creator's goodness and unfailing love will pursue you all the days of your life, and you will dwell in His presence forever. You know, so goodness and unfailing love is waiting for you, so receive it. I was just telling a friend of mine that I have a hard time receiving, and that's, you know, that's a part of trauma in my life in the past, you know, when I didn't have nothing and I was a dependent, having to sleep on people's couches, different families' couches, you know, and I had to have somebody do things for me to where I'm an independent person now. So trying to receive something is like, it's kind of hard for me because it made me feel some type of way. But you know, that's some little trauma I'm dealing with, you know, that I'm overcoming. But you know, that'll wrap it up. You know, surely your Creator's goodness and unfailing love will pursue you all the days of your life, and you will dwell in His presence forever. So that'll wrap it up. You know, y'all keep your head up. Go out there and try to continue to be 1% better every day. Be a blessing to somebody else. And let's go out there and live. Let's not just exist, but let's live and enjoy life. Keep your head up. You know, remember, life is a forward march. We learn from our past mistakes, and we press on to the blessings that's in front of us. Y'all be cool and keep your heads up.